to our council meeting of the 14th of March. Just a note that we are being live streamed, and if we could all please stand for our opening karakia. Te tawa mai runga, te tawa mai raro, te tawa mai roto, te tawa mai waho, kia tau mai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, hone, puie, tāie. Well, we've got a very hefty agenda ahead of us, so we'll crack into it. First up, we have apologies from Councillor Mawson. If I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Brown, Councillor Crystal. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Announcements from myself. Firstly, just to note that we do have an additional public excluded item which was circulated separately, and understanding order 9.12 that has been included on our public excluded agenda. And also I just wanted to note that we have this evening at East Pier our first natural hazards drop-in. So this is with regards to the natural hazards chapter of our proposed district plan, and just anyone out there in the community that wanted to come along and ask any questions or find out a little bit more about that. It is 4:30 till 6:30 tonight at East Pier. We look forward to seeing you. Any announcements by management?
None.
Right, so we'll get straight into it. And first up, our first agenda item, we have the Hawke's Bay Airport. Wendy Harvey. Oh, confirmation of minutes. No. Confirmation of the minutes from the council meeting 1st of February. Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now our first agenda item, and we have the Hawke's Bay Airport here to present their half-year report, and also we'll be looking at their statement of intent, and I'd like to welcome the Chair, Wendy Harvey, and Chief Financial Officer, Rochelle Ham, to come and present to us, please. Welcome to both of you.
Now we're on. Tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, just want to thank those of you who took the opportunity to join us on Saturday night where we celebrated the airport's 60th anniversary. It was a fantastic evening, and we had the opportunity to unveil a couple of significant displays, one of which is the history of the airport, which was prepared with the assistance of Michael Fowler, local historian, and a pre-earthquake map of Te Whanganui a Orotu, which was created with the assistance of Mana Ahuriri. So they are in the airport still, and they are considered a tool or an opportunity for the community to visit and familiarise themselves with more about the district and the community that we live in. Also, just wanted to start by acknowledging that during the past few weeks we did have the resignation of our CEO, Rob Stratford. Just to give you an indication of where we're at in terms of recruitment, we have applications closed today, and we have quite a healthy response so far from what I can see. Our intention is to have completed the first round, shortlisting in the first round of interviews by the end of this month. And then we'll take it from there. So all on all, this isn't a quick process. We want to get the right person, but also noting that that person may in fact have their own notice requirements. So it could be some months yet before we actually see the successful applicant beginning. So you have with you today the half-year financial statements along with our draft SOI, which was presented at the end of last month. Just turning to the highlights, we are doing well, is probably a good way of summing it up. You may have heard through the media Air New Zealand are concerned about softening passenger numbers. That has not been the case in Hawke's Bay, and dare I say it, part of that I think is due to the fly in, fly out that was created through Cyclone Gabrielle. But Air New Zealand are quite confident that our schedules will remain unchanged at this point in time, which is not necessarily the case for other regional airports. The other thing that you will also see in the half-year reports is that we are tracking slightly ahead of budget in terms of our SOI targets. And some of the notable points that I just wanted to raise with you, particular note is, and this is a biggie for us because it's core infrastructure. We did complete the apron overlay project at the beginning of the year. That's been put off for over 18 months now. Firstly, as a result of COVID and the delay in getting contractors and materials and so on, we initially had those delays, and then Gabrielle last year created even further challenges for us. So we were exceedingly happy. It may not have been on time, but it was on budget to have got the apron overlay completed in December without disruption to flights, so it was done overnight. The other notable point is that Sun Air are doing well. They began flights last year. The obvious benefit that we had of a direct flight to Wairoa and Gisborne can't be understated. They are enjoying being with us, I think would be the way I'd explain it, and they have indicated to us that they intend this year, towards the end of this year, opening up or extending their network to include Hamilton. So a positive for us. You'll also see there that we are slightly ahead of passenger numbers, so 1% up on the SOI. You'll also see that revenue is tracking well at 6.5 million, which is up 7.5% on the previous year. There are a few things that influence that, not the least of which is obviously passenger numbers, but we also we do an annual review of the landing charges with Air New Zealand, and that's captured in that 6.5 million. We also are showing a net profit of 1.2 million. Again, as I've said, passenger numbers are up, so is our OPEX. The reason for that, we did identify that we needed to recruit additional firefighters to ensure that we had full cover of the rosters to meet our accredited levels of operation. There is also a fair chunk of that in consultancy. We have we recruited last year an infrastructure manager. We are now well underway with our 10-year CapEx plan and looking to get designs done up and projects underway. And the consultancy has to some extent been slotted back to that, along with consenting issues. So we do have a challenge currently with the designation of much of the airport as a wetland. And so when we are looking at these projects, we are running into additional design work and consenting issues. So that's something that we're currently working with to try and see if we can navigate a way forward that's whilst we accept our responsibilities under those standards, we also need to be able to ensure that we can provide safe infrastructure. So it's a work in progress. As mentioned, Air New Zealand are tracking well for us. Passenger numbers of 654,000 over the last 12 months. And, you know, many of you, when I see you, talk to me about how full the planes are. That's right, they are. We're looking at an average capacity there of 86% across all routes. The one that in particular that we're looking at possibly increasing in terms of greater uptake is that Auckland-Napier one. That's one of the busiest scheduled routes in New Zealand. So, yeah, all positive and trending in the right direction, I think is the way I describe it. Statement of intent. I have to say at the outset, we have done this on the basis that we have presented to you what we think will look like a well-run business maximising shareholder value. we are taking a bit of a punt on our aspirations being consistent with yours because we haven't received a letter of expectation from any of our shareholders. So what you will have seen in the draft is, to some extent, some areas of placeholder to ensure that we can have the conversations as appropriate. In particular, I'm talking about the dividend placeholder there. So I'll just point that out to you at the beginning. Just looking at the key points of it, just looking, we have here, I guess, the overwhelming framework that we operate within, which is our values and the strategy within which we operate. The key objectives that you'll see in the SOI, we're looking at investment in significant infrastructure over the next few years. We're doing this because we want to ensure the resilience and the safety of the airport predominantly. We are looking at, in the short term, a new fire engine and more particularly a new fire station. The one that we currently have doesn't meet the earthquake ratings for a building which is used for firefighting and security. We have got to the stage where we have a concept, we've worked through the logistics of where it should be located, and we've done benchmarking with other airports and FENS, and the estimated cost of that, which we are working to, is 8.5 million. So it's a fairly hefty chunk of our spend. We are also looking at projects around stormwater, extending the aprons and car parking, not necessarily extending, but actually enhancing the existing facility. We are looking, I seem to have lost one. There we go, thank you. We are also looking at revenue around $15 million. There are obviously the qualifications around that assumes passenger numbers remain as we're forecasting. And the other thing is that going into that calculation is our OPEX spend. And so that is OPEX and aeronautical CAPEX? Yeah. So that assumes that we are able to actually spend our CAPEX in this year to enable it to be captured within the subsequent pricing reviews. The other thing that we're also doing, we've talked to you previously about the fact that we are ACA Level 4 Plus accredited in terms of decarbonisation. We are, or were, the only airport in the Southern Hemisphere that actually have achieved that rating. What we've discussed as an organisation is looking at broadening that. So ACA is very focused solely on decarbonisation. And whilst we want to commit to continuing our journey there, we also want to look more broadly across sustainability per se, and we're looking at other ESG frameworks that we can be operating within. It's not to say that we won't stick with ACA, but at the moment we are finding it difficult to justify the step up and the benefits that would come to go into Level 5, which is the top rating. We, in the meantime, have that Level 4 Plus accreditation for 3 years, so we've got some time to invest in and work through that with the team. About our values. Just on the passenger number outlook, we aren't looking at massive increases. So I think, Rochelle, we've worked through about a 3% year-on-year increase as we've worked through.
Yeah. I think the key here is that in 2025 there is quite a lot of growth in the Auckland Napier route, which Wendy's alluded to. So we're looking at close on 170 additional movements. So which, given where our load factors are, we're sitting currently on the Auckland route about 88, 89%. So next year we've actually upped our estimate to 86%, which is well and truly within the bounds of how we're operating. So I think the growth in the numbers comes from, one, sustained passengers through the year, but also that growth and movements next year.
This graph is actually quite telling for me, because what it shows is that resilience needs to be at the heart of what we do, and diversification is critical to our ongoing, I guess, relevance to the region. If you look here at June 2018, those were the halcyon days where pre-COVID, pre-inflation, Jetstar exiting, we were sitting well over 700,000 passengers, and then each of those events happened. And so at the moment, we don't forecast that we will get back to those days of 2018 until 2027. But it does show that, and I think I've said to some of you before, we could track along quite nicely and make a reasonable return and create shareholder value for you until that day then when one of our critical risks is realised. And the day that we can't operate the airport for an extended period of time is the day that we're looking at diversification of our revenue streams and looking to see where, we may have the ability to keep funding coming through the door. If you look at other airports during COVID in particular, the commercialisation of the land around them and rents and so on was what got them through. We went from, normal to nothing in the period of a week. So that's very much the board's focus in terms of when we're looking at the strategy, not just making sure we've got good infrastructure that enables us to operate a high-performing airport, but also making sure that we've got that shock-proof capacity in the future. Rochelle, I'm going to hand the financials over to you.
Okay, so just as a bit of a snapshot in terms of where we are forecasting to be, I think it's important to point out that our forecast for this year end is actually quite a lot better than our SOI as well. So in terms of passengers, we're forecasting to be at 664,000, which is quite a step up on our 650 that was part of our SOI. And the growth that we're seeing between 24 and 25 is really the additional services, but also an increase in load factors assumed. So in terms of actual growth over and above that, it's pretty modest, to be fair, and a lot of that is about Air New Zealand's capacity as well. So in terms of revenue, so you can see there's quite a jump in revenue to 15.5 million next year. That's largely driven because, as Wendy's mentioned, we've got quite a lot of investment in airfield infrastructure and aeronautical infrastructure, which is fire station, apron and runway improvements. So that impacts on our passenger rate with Air New Zealand, which in turn drives that revenue number. We're predicting to be close on 3 million profit after tax, so this doesn't really allow for any increase or decrease in revaluation, which is our policy around land and assets. I think we've probably taken a lot of the upside previously, so we're predicting a fairly flat movement there. In terms of key metrics, so we are seeing an improvement in return on equity up to 5%, but our gearing does actually jump a little bit to 32%, which is largely due to the big infrastructure projects that we've got planned. If we just have a look at what our capital spend is for the next couple of years, just to put some of these numbers in perspective, we're forecasting to end the year around the 7.2 million, and that the big projects there are fire truck and the apron overlay, and then there's quite a lot around stormwater in this year also. If we go forward into the SOI period, we're sitting up close to just over 9 million each year, and this is really about fire station 8.5. It's about some of the resilience projects that we've been talking about, stormwater. It's about, there's quite a lot of runway maintenance required in this period as well. So a lot of the projects are pretty capital intensive, but also necessary to actually continue to operate and continue to grow. One of our other key focuses is around actually how we move forward in terms of green energy ready. And so there's some investment there in terms of how we might electrify and how we work within New Zealand as well. That's sort of the summary.
So just to finish, we have put in a placeholder for dividends, but obviously that is subject to discussion with and between our respective shareholders. But what I would say is that we have to date adopted a policy of paying down debt, and we've continued to do that quite successfully. So to date, what we've done is reinvested back into the airport and paid down debt, but obviously aware, I can't unlearn the media and the conversation that happened with Hamilton District Council the other day, but that, from our perspective, remains a matter for discussion with the shareholders. So look, I think I'll leave it there and happy for Rochelle or I to take any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Rochelle. Just a quick question with me with regards to the additional flights to Auckland. That's obviously already been agreed by Air New Zealand.
No.
It's in their schedules.
It's in their schedules, but if you're talking about over and above, sort of like extra, they simply don't have the capacity to do that. Discussions in a nutshell are, if we had the planes, we're struggling to find the crew. If we had the crew, we still have to train them. So they have a problem over the next couple of years where some of their aircraft need to be taken out for some major work to be done on them, which means that they're going to be backfilling using ATRs, which are what service the Auckland route. So the ability for them to load up with extra flights is quite constrained at the moment.
And yet you've built the extra flights into the statement of intent?
That is off their schedules.
Yeah.
So it is actually scheduled. I think the risk is what happens with the capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so far that is exactly what's scheduled. So, and we're seeing that growth in our current numbers as well.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now open up for Councillor Bogue.
Thank you very much for a really positive report and congratulations. It sounds really good. Going back to dividends, could you just explain again what's the process that the board goes through to decide when and if we shareholders get dividends?
So we always make that, ultimately it's a decision of the board based on firstly solvency and ability to operate, but normally what we would do is have the discussion with the three shareholders around the SOI to actually agree, subject to performance, what that approach to dividends or not, as the case may be, might be, and that would be reflected through the SOI.
Just a supplementary, if I may. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you recall when or if we have had a dividend previously?
It has been a number of years. I think, in my memory, it was about 2018. I could be wrong, but pretty sure it was around about then because at that time we were embarking on the rebuild of the terminal and the decision was made at that stage to not seek dividends in the interests of investment in the terminal.
And then subsequent to that, of course, we've had the impact of COVID, and then there has been the agreement around paying down debt.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, thank you both so much for your presentation this morning. Really good reading on both those papers. A couple of questions. Firstly, regarding, I suppose, the current capacity and management of the airport operationally without a CEO, do you have any concerns around your ability to deliver as a result of that?
I'm glad to see Rochelle shaking her head there. So what we've done is we made the decision, we're a small team, but we've actually got a highly effective senior leadership team. So we are fortunate in that regard, as well as we also have a director who was the former CEO of Palmerston North Airport. So how we've chosen to manage this intervening period is that through myself and Darren Cusack, who's that director, we're working with the senior leadership team too. And frankly, I haven't seen, I don't know, I'll let you comment, but the leadership team are doing an outstanding job. So, yeah.
Did you have anything to add?
Oh, not really. I mean, I think we're all we know what our responsibilities are, and I think it's been quite valuable for us to be a lot more involved with the board. So we're all stepping up at the same time as these guys are actually a lot more involved in our day-to-day, so it's a bit of a win-win.
Awesome, thank you. And just one more, if I may, sorry.
I was just going to say the key will be knowing for when the board is to step back out. We're having so much fun. But
Relatable. And just my other question is around the solar project. We've seen a little bit of few updates around that at the moment.
Yes.
I see in the statement of intent there is a line around that no royalties, rental incomes have been recognised around this project at the moment. In regards to a timeline, when would those types of conversations, do you envision them taking place?
After we've got a consent.
Okay, so that's what it's hinged on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, we need to know, one, whether we can get a consent, and secondly, what conditions might attract to that consent, and then we would be in a position to the constructability and so on.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Simpson.
My question, and congratulations on your report to this point, follows on from Councillor Crown, because in your progress report in relation to the solar farm, you say resource consent achieved in 2024 and June 24, which is only 3 months away.
Right.
So what's the likelihood of that being achieved?
There is a hiccup, and the hiccup is that currently both the land to the north and the airport are subject to negotiation in terms of the shareholding of the airport and the Pāmu land, which is holding up our ability to get some agreements in writing. It's not that everybody's not enthusiastic about it, it's that we need to work through that process, which is currently preventing us from getting what we need to lodge that consent. If we can get that soon, as we're pretty much ready to go, we're just waiting for that to be worked through.
And my second question again is in relation to that. You're securing 2 anchor tenants for the Aero Park, and again you've got a June 24 time frame. You've got amber showing in your report. Is that likely to go to red in the next 6 months, or are we likely to see green?
There are heads of agreement that are current and active, so we're working through some of those at the moment. Some of the biggest sticking points are probably around lease term, if people are actually building, because we're sort of opting for ground lease. And there's another exciting heads of agreement that's out there that we're working through. In reality, will it strike by June? Possibly not, but there are definitely some active heads of agreement in play at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on your report. Everything's very positive, and as shareholders, I'm sure we're very happy with that. The statement of service performance, I just want to go back to that document. There's 2 red flags in there, so what I'm seeking here is just simply an indication of where on the board's priority list these things are sitting and what is the nature of these matters. So the red ones are the development of development and implementation of critical risk management framework. That's a red. So that may be simply a capacity issue, or it may be simply you've got a lot on.
It was timing related, because that was due September, so that has been subsequently presented and approved by the board.
Okay,
So that's in play.
Thank you. And the other one was commence at least 2 new point-to-point domestic services. So my questioning there is around, is that with a new service provider, or are those discussions with existing service providers?
Both.
Both. And are they progressing positively?
I think Wendy mentioned the Sunia connection, which is the Hamilton connection. So just the thing with that, I think the timing on that was December 23.
Yep.
So I think the Sunia Hamilton service was potentially agreed in principle in January. So it's, once again, you're talking timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I just will take a moment, because we have ended up wrapping up 2 agenda items in one. And just, Caroline, I note that your name is against the statement of intent paper. Did you have any comments that you wanted to add to that discussion? No, I don't. No. Okay, thank you. And I guess just recognising here that it's the draft statement of intent.
Yes.
And there is an opportunity, I guess, for some ongoing discussions, and in particular, you've said that around that dividend placeholder. So I guess just a bit of an indication of process and timelines around what that will look like to meet your need to finalise that by a certain date, I'm sure.
So the normal process would be that the draft's gone out to all shareholders, and we would, I'm just trying to think the date, I think it's by the end of March, we get feedback from you as to, and then we would work through with each of the shareholders respectively in terms of if there's any areas of change from the draft or areas of difference that we might need to engage with you further on to work through.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. So if we could just note in the minutes, please, Carolyn, the action there to have that feedback on the statement of intent back to the airport by the end of the month.
Just one other question, sorry.
Councillor Bogue.
Thank you. The third shareholder is the Crown,
Yes,
and I'm wondering, who do you work with there? What?
Treasury.
Treasury, thank you.
So if there's no further questions or discussion, could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Crown. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Taylor? And this is for agenda items 1 and 2. We will move them together.
No, I think it's a very positive report. The questions that have been raised here by the elected members have been answered satisfactorily, and congratulate you on the progress that we're making.
Thank you.
Councillor Crown.
Nothing further to add.
Any further councillors wishing to speak to the motion? No, I'll put that then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you so much, Wendy and Rochelle. Pleasure to have you here. And I can just reiterate what several councillors have said, a fantastic result. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, the draft housing strategy and housing review. And I would welcome Thurnis and Anne up to present the paper, please. Welcome. Oh, and Alistair.
Morena, the koutou katoa. I just want to say that this report is, is one of the most significant reports of this 3-year plan or LTP, and it's really good to have it, coming to you at this stage, so that we can get your approval and then for the discussion with the community and get their feedback. So that's great. Just a point I want to make about this is the first of 6 reports that's going to become part of the LTP or 3-year plan. So the next 6 reports, they're all related to it. And the last point I want to make is just to thank all the staff that's worked on the housing review and the strategy. A lot of work's gone into it, and just specifically I would like to thank Anne Bradbury and Stephanie Murphy for their work. That's been really appreciated. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Anne to take us through the report.
Morena koutou. As Amir pointed out, we have Alistair up here with me. That's just in case you ask me any tricky finance questions I can't answer. So this report looks at progress that's been taken on actions following a resolution from Council on the 18th of May 2022. And it mostly looks at the draft housing strategy and a housing review that we've undertaken this year. So I'll start with the housing strategy. This was developed by undertaking hui and interviews with our key partners and stakeholders. So that included Mana Ahuriri, K3, which is the development arm of Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, MSD, MHUD, Housing Aotearoa, which is a community housing provider, our Executive Director of Community Services, and Councillor Maxine Bogue. So the draft strategy looks along the continuum from rough sleepers all the way through to full home ownership. There are a lot of actors that play a role in this continuum, and the draft strategy highlights 3 focus areas where council plays a role. So the first focus area is rough sleepers and emergency housing. So the council plays a connector and an advocate role in this focus area. We connect with public agencies to help them provide support to lift people out of homelessness. The second focus area is providing sufficient non-market housing options for households that cannot afford the private rental and home ownership market. So the council again is a connector and advocate in this focus area, but we're also a housing provider. We currently have 377 units across our 12 villages, and we'll talk more about that in the housing review. The third focus area is enabling housing across greenfield and brownfield developments to meet demand. So in this focus area, the council is an infrastructure provider, it's a regulator, and it's also a landowner. So our City Strategy Directorate works in this area through things like future development strategy and being a regulator. So the housing strategy is in draft. Next steps for this is we won't be consulting on this as part of the 3-year plan. We didn't want to confuse the community with too many things at the moment. We really want them to concentrate on the 3-year plan. But we will be looking at the results of the 3-year plan consultation. If we approve the housing review and the 3-year plan, we will be looking at the results of the consultation. We will also be discussing the draft strategy with our stakeholders, and we'll be bringing back the final strategy to the council in October of this year. So I'm just going to move on to the housing review now. Since 2022, the last review, there's been a few external factors that have made us relook at this again, and we were looking at the recommendations from the resolution in May 2022. These factors are things like inflationary costs and Cyclone Gabrielle and other things. So we've discussed this with you in workshops this year, and you all agreed that there were five key principles which you would use to guide your decision making, and I'm just going to mention them now. The first one would be honouring our current tenants and making sure they all have a home. The second principle is making sure there is little financial pressure on our community, our ratepayers and our tenants. The third one is to move away from social housing over time. The fourth is to keep and potentially increase our numbers of retirement homes. And the fifth was enabling further investment into our retirement housing to make sure we have warm and dry homes for our tenants. So the housing review report covers 5 options. The first one is the status quo. This is continuing to our tenancy and our asset management is provided in-house, continuing with our 80% and 20% cost recovery. So the tenants pay 80% of the cost recovery for the villages, and our ratepayers pay 20%. This will continue to use loan funding and rates increases to maintain the provision of all the villages. Option 2 is retirement only. This option looks at moving away from social housing and selling the 3 social housing villages. This would help our balance sheet once the villages are sold, but in 10 years after the villages are sold, we'd be back in the same position at the moment. So it's not long term. It's not financially sustainable in the long term. Option 3 is a mixed delivery model, which is our preferred approach. This is a broad option that looks at selling our social villages. It also looks at partnerships or outsourcing our tenancy management services or our asset management services. And it also looks at redevelopment, so potentially redeveloping one of the retirement villages and providing more houses. Option 4 is independent delivery, and this would mean an independent housing entity would deliver the housing. So the council, once the houses or the villages are transferred to this independent entity, the council wouldn't have much control, but the council would have control in choosing who they would transfer the villages to. Option 5 is no direct provision of housing. This means the council would sell the housing portfolio, and through the workshops, you all made it clear that this is not an option you want to consider, but it is included in the report to give a broad range of options. So officers are recommending to consult on option 3 as our preferred option. This option aligns with the 5 principles that I mentioned earlier. It also aligns with our draft housing strategy, and it will help with long-term financially sustainability for running the housing villages. So the engagement question is proposed as part of the 3-year plan consultation document, which you'll be hearing about later, and it's split into 2 parts. The first part is looking at the status quo versus focusing on retirement housing only. And then the second part is if we were to shift to retirement housing, how can we do that? And that looks at options 2, 3 and 4. Officers are recommending option 3 is our preferred approach there. So engaging on the 3-year plan consultation will be mentioned by our colleagues later, but I just want to discuss engagement with our tenants, which is already underway. So we have delivered 2 letters to our tenants already to let them know about the review and to give them a little bit more detail. Myself and one of the members of the housing team have walked around the housing villages last week to discuss this with them. We spoke to around 72 tenants. Well, understandably, they're a little bit worried. I think they appreciated the visits. And we've also given them, well, they already know, but we've told them to call the council number and they'll be referred to me. So I've given them a call back and spoken to tenants, and I think I've spoken to approximately 12 tenants. So we have reached out to tenants in multiple ways. If the review and if the 3-year plan consultation document is approved today, we will be hand delivering the housing consultation part of the consultation documents to the tenants tomorrow with a hard copy submission form. We are trying to move away from hard copy submission forms, but for some of these people, that might be the only way that they can put a submission in. And lastly from me, there is one error in the housing review report. It mentions that we only consulted the tenants last time, which is incorrect. We did consult the community as well, so I'll get that amended in the review. And that's all from me, so happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Anne. And I do just want to say thank you so very much for the engagement you've had with our tenants to date, because obviously that is something that as elected members we have highlighted as being incredibly important to us to ensure that they're fully informed and that we support them through this process. So yeah, thank you for what you've done to date, and I know that that will continue throughout the consultation period. And I'll open up for questions. Councillor Bogue.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you also for involving me in the discussion and the planning of the strategy in particular. So I think it's very timely that we have a strategy. The direction came from council, a couple of years ago, but I know at the bottom end of the housing continuum, Napier has got the 5th highest number of people per 10,000 on the social housing register, 700 households on that list and 138 households in emergency housing. So at that end of the spectrum, and I know right across the spectrum, there's a huge need for us to have a look at what our role is and how we can support the housing issues for people. In terms of the housing strategy, I just want to mention, and I have contacted you about this and the Mayor, just to say that there were some decisions made by Council in July 2022 concerning homelessness, and it's not mentioned anywhere in the strategy, and as the strategy is under discussion and will be for a few months, I would appreciate if those were taken into consideration. Just a summary, we agreed to form a regional task force with iwi partners, Whānau, Pounamu, regional local agencies to develop a regional homelessness action plan, investigate the establishment of a community hub, a regional place-based housing approach with Hastings District Council, do research with Whānau, Pounamu, provide a network, and I guess the way this could be incorporated into the strategy, should the officers deem appropriate, is to include local government and Hastings District Council as stakeholders. They are not mentioned in the strategy as it is, so it would be good to incorporate that in there and have a look at those decisions and how they can be put into action. There was something else on the strategy.
Sorry, before you move on, Councillor Bogue, I'll just give an opportunity for council officers to actually provide some comment on that and whether those recommendations that came from that July meeting would be sit within the actual strategy or as part of a resulting sort of action plan that will come out of the strategy?
Yeah, so the recommendations are mentioned in the strategy, but they're not detailed. So it mentions that there was a homelessness in Napier report and recommendations from the council were approved. Sorry, the recommendations from the report were approved by council in July 2022, but they're not outlined in the strategy, but it is mentioned. I see the strategy as sort of being an umbrella strategy, and there'll be things that hang off the strategy, including homelessness. So officers in my team are working on the recommendations that were approved by council in July 2022, including working with Hastings District Council. And yeah, so they are being worked on. If we include too much in the overarching housing strategy, I think we might complicate it a little bit. And I think the regional action plan, I think, is probably a good place to put a lot of the actions for homelessness in, which will hang off the strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, that's fine. There were just a couple of things with the housing review. The names of the villages in the review, they talk about Wellesley Place and Carlisle Place. And I wonder if they could all, we don't know these as the Carlisle Place housing, from what I understand, if it would be better to call them all villages. We usually call it the Carlisle Street or Wellesley Road rather than those. I think it would be better for the tenants to see that we're using the appropriate name for their village. And the only other suggestion I have is, would it be possible for the 5 points that are made on page 43 of our agenda, those basic points that we agreed on about honouring our current tenants and making sure they have a home, wanting to make sure there's as little financial pressure as possible on our community, move away from social housing, keep and potentially increase our retirement housing and enable further investment into retirement housing. I'm wondering if it would be possible for those to go into the review. I know it's quite a long document already, but just I know it's in our agenda, but it might be good because those are really important principles for us as a council.
We can include them if the council wants us to. The review was done independently, but I know we have discussed it with you at workshops, so we can include that in the review that was agreed at workshops, that these are the 5 key principles that the council wishes to use to guide their decision making.
I think that would be useful.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Price.
Just a quick question. I'd just like to confirm in our preferred option compared to option 2 that in 10 years' time we won't be back to square one with a debt that would have to be serviced by the ratepayer.
Yes, that is true. So option 2 involves selling the 3 social villages, but then continuing to operate in the same way. So that will help ourselves financially in the short term, but then as we carry on operating in the same way, we'll end up back in the same position. Option 3 looks at selling the 3 social villages and investing that money back into the portfolio. And then there's a few other parts of option 3 as well that will mean that we will be, it's better for our long-term financial sustainability.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, team. I'd just like to, I suppose, reconfirm one of the assurances that I got as part of the workshops that we went through. So one of my concerns was that we lock into a preferred option and then we're not able to obviously consider alternative models of delivery. And I'm just, obviously I understand where we got to in the workshops, but would be quite interested to reconfirm that flexibility, I suppose, that through the submission process we will have the opportunity to consider alternative modes of delivery as well as whether or not we sell some of those villages that are referred to in our preferred option.
So we had to be quite specific in the consultation document, which I think we all understand, and we had to give a preferred option and we had to have financial implications backing up the options. So we will be accepting submissions. People can say whatever they would like on their submission form and the council will be considering them. This is going to be, the implementation of the housing review will be a long process, and I expect depending on what the submissions say and depending on what decision the council makes, we may end up doing more consultation further down the line if needed. But yes, the council will be making the decision following the submissions.
And through you, Madam Mayor, so just to be explicitly clear, yes, we can consider alternative modes of divestment and alternative modes of delivery as part of the consultation on this item.
Yes, you can. I think if it strays too much from some of the options, then we might need to do further consultation because the housing villages are significant assets and we'll have to abide by our significance and engagement policy.
Thank you. And finally, through you, if it diverges too much from the preferred options, you're confident that the options that we are presenting for consultation are as wide as we possibly can have at this stage?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If there's no further questions, any discussion?
Yeah, happy to have some discussion. Thank you, Your Worship. So you're looking at me, so I'll start. I'd just like to, I suppose, note the housing strategy development work, and I think that that is really pivotal, and I support the position that you've come to of not including that in this round of consultation to sort of muddy the waters between the two issues we'll be consulting on. So would support that and would thank yourself and your team and particularly Councillor Boak, who I know have done a lot of work on that, and it's great to see that draft housing strategy coming together. From my perspective, I think what we came to in the workshops, which you've really accurately highlighted, not only in your initial chat there, but also in the paper, is I can't remember what we call them, but in my mind, there are our objectives to this review. Those 5 really key principles, I think, is what you've called them, that we've come to, and to paraphrase those from my perspective, it's that none of our tenants lose their home, which is, of course, so important, and it's why we put it as number 1. That we reduce that rates pressure on our community as a whole. We know that as an organisation, our costs are increasing. There was a great thing that came through from local government this morning showing, the cost of building a bridge has gone up 38% in the last year, as an example. So as an organisation, we are under a lot of pressure. So that second principle around reducing that price rates pressure to not only ourselves, but also the cost to our tenants is really pivotal. Point number 3, that principle number 3, for me is about acknowledging, and I know we talked about this, that we shouldn't necessarily be the providers of social housing, that there are organisations better resourced, better funded, better operationally set up to deliver social housing, but that we've got this opportunity in retirement housing as a bit of a gap in our local market, and as an ageing population, that's a place that we want to focus on, so acknowledging that. Can't read my own notes, but and that 5th one around a warm, dry, compliant home. So acknowledging that we still need to invest in the asset that we have. Where I sort of vary, I suppose, from just accepting our preferred position, and I understand why we've come to this point, is I'm really interested in the submissions. I'm really interested in what alternative options might be out there that we haven't fully explored yet, and having an opportunity to really delve into those. I know a couple of years ago when we received submissions, we had some proposals come through from community groups, from chip providers, from the sector that provided us some alternative options on the delivery. So I know in our recommendations, we talk about maintaining control of our retirement housing. And for me, I'm less interested in retaining control. I'm more interested in retaining ownership and making sure that our tenants get the service they need at the right price. So control for me is the word that doesn't necessarily stick, because I'm not sure moving into the future if council actually controlling the ongoing operations of housing is where our energy is best spent. As long as our tenants, we meet those principles and those objectives. Our tenants have a nice, warm, dry home, security, and an affordable price. So I suppose my challenge is, as part of this discussion, is to the community, is to the sector, bring us the options. You've got our 5 objectives that we want to achieve in this review. If there's alternative ways of delivering that, I am so looking forward to seeing those as part of our debate, as part of the 3-year plan. So again, thank you to the team. It hasn't been an easy place to get to. I know there's been a lot of work and there's a lot of legislation that goes into it for how we prepare those consultation items, but yeah, that's where I'm sitting on this item. Happy to support for now, but really looking forward to the discussion in the 3-year plan. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further discussion? Could I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crown, Councillor Bogue. And just noting that as part of the recommendation, it is to note the draft housing strategy and recommend officers continue to work on that. And that will be brought back to us in October for adoption, receive the 2024 housing review and proceed with consultation on option 3 as the preferred option. Councillor Crown, did you wish to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you again to our staff for all the mahi that they've done on these 2 pieces of work, really. I just wanted to say that I think by removing option 5, the no direct provision of housing, and presenting our preferred option, what we're actually doing is clearly stating to our community that the council has a key role to play here. And I see this as an opportunity to better define our lane, as Deputy Mayor Brosnan summarised so well, you know, considering the provision of social versus retirement focus, etc. You know, it's all about making sure that council-owned housing is affordable for tenants and our ratepayers, and that it supports our city's housing needs best now and into the future. So like Deputy Mayor Brosnan, I am really interested to hear from our community as to what they think of the options that we're going to put in front of them, our preference, and how they might provide or offer alternative solutions to the challenge that we face in this. But the key thing for me is that we are saying that council definitely has a role to play here, which I think is incredibly important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
I would just like to say, you know, I'm really proud of the fact that council has provided social housing or public housing for particularly vulnerable groups, particularly elderly people over the years. And I know at the absolute heart of the review and the strategy is our concern for the well-being of those tenants. And I'm sure that after we hear submissions, that we will be able to find what is the best option for our ratepayers, but also for those vulnerable tenants who are probably a bit worried at the moment. But I think we're going through the right process, and we will come up with something. Hopefully, the submissions will arrive at something that's sustainable and continues putting those vulnerable members of our community at the very heart of what we decide. Thank you.
Any further speakers? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, team. And yeah, once again, thank you for the immense amount of work that has gone into this. It's much appreciated and has been challenging at times, but I think we've arrived at a really good place in terms of what we're consulting on. So thank you. Next up, we have our draft financial contributions policy, and Paulina is presenting, and Caroline. Welcome.
Morning, everyone. So this paper seeks a council adoption of the draft financial contribution policy to go out for public consultation together with a long-term plan at the end of March. Under the Local Government Act, councils are required to adopt a financial contribution policy or a development contribution policy when they review the long-term plan. Is a legal requirement. So in reviewing this draft policy, we are fulfilling that legal requirement. The purpose of the financial contributions policy is to collect contribution for developers to fund any growth or service-related pressures on council. In reviewing this financial contribution policy, we have involved 3 different departments, so the finance department as well as the infrastructure team. So this is a cross-council policy document. We have done a pragmatic review of the financial contribution policy of the 2021 financial contribution policy at this stage for the reasons stated within my paper. So there's a few things that has allowed only for a pragmatic approach to the review and not a full review of costs associated with development. So the main changes of this financial contribution policy relate to, as I said, minor changes in the wording, mainly clarifying the implementation or how and when does it get charged, clarifying the extent of some incentives or discounts that the council offered, especially for incentivizing intensification within the CBD. And also we have indexes the figures to reflect inflation as well. So that is another minor change as well. So we don't consider any big risks with this financial contribution draft that we're gonna propose to the public. We don't consider the high level of risk. But in longer term, the view is to potentially move to a development contribution policy, which is a bit different to the financial contribution policy once we have a better understanding of the legal context and the changes to the RMA, etc. There's a few considerations before we can move to that development contribution policy state. So those are the main changes that we're proposing. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline.
Sure.
Just to add on the financials, there's been no major change. We've just indexed the financial contributions, so that's really the only change on the numbers. But also I just wanted to sort of point out, because this is the first of a number of policies that are coming to you at this meeting, and just to point out that these policies form part of the sort of the supporting documents to the long-term plan. So the changes that we're making to this policy and the next policy agenda items, they require consultation on their own, but they will be consulted on in tandem with the long-term plan. So just making that clear.
Thanks, Caroline. Questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Just in relation to the approach to consultation, will developers, our regular developers within this area, be contacted independently, or will they just be required to go through the platforms that are put out there?
This is a common practice to review the financial contribution policy along with the long-term plan. So the engagement was going to be part of the suite of engagement approach that we are adopting for the long-term plan. So it's not specific going to developers to seek their input. However, everybody in the community is targeted as in the consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? So the recommendation is that we adopt the draft financial contributions policy for public consultation and adopt the proposed consultation approach, and that the final policy will be brought back to us in June as part of the adoption of the long-term plan. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Tariha. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Paulina, and to all the departments involved in drafting these policy amendments. Thank you.
Councillor Taraha.
Kia ora dear, tautoko, just some minor changes, so happy to second that.
you. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Paulina and Caroline.
Thank you.
And so moving on to our next policy review, which is revenue and financing, and Alistair, I believe, is... Welcome.
Morena koutou. So we have discussed this review in a bit of detail previously. So I wonder if we can take the paper as read, or do you want me to go through a bit more detail?
I'm happy to take it as read, as Luce. No, okay. Thank you very much, Alistair. So again, this is to adopt the draft policy for consultation, and that's what I'm just about to do. So do we have any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Bogue.
Oh, thank you, Alistair. I did speak to Gary about this yesterday. I was quite intrigued by a policy that I wasn't aware of before, which is the rates postponement. I understand from the rates...
That's the
next paper.
Oh, next item, okay. Sorry.
All good. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Hi, Alistair. Just trying to understand that table as part of page 55, where you've got the activities, and it talks about a midpoint.
Yeah, because the ranges in the policy say it might be 50 to 60%. For the table purposes, I just put the midpoint.
Right, I understand. And
Sure.
so for all of those where there is a difference on rates and a positive, all of those line items, animal control, aquarium, eyesight, municipal theatre, we're signalling as part of this increased funding from rates into those departments. Is that correct?
So those items will require more ratepayer contribution.
Yeah. I think the one I'd like a little bit more understanding of is the eyesight. Why would that be?
I think eyesight has struggled to meet the funding targets set by the revenue and financing policy over time. It's quite materially different to what we're actually achieving versus the policy.
Right.
And we've only really tried to pull out the ones which we really aren't meeting the targets and think require a change. And that signals the fact that there's probably more of a public good aspect to items. And then we see that in the cost recovery of the activities.
And my final question through you, Mayor Wise, is your view that there's still aspirational in terms of targets for each of these where we are signalling additional rates funding?
You're correct. It is a balance between setting a target and what we can actually achieve. And I think animal control is a good example where we think the public good aspect has increased, but we're still setting that kind of a range to try and achieve the top end of the range. But being realistic, that it's about a 50% general rates versus fees and charges recovery. So we haven't proposed a lot of changes, so a lot of our targets still remain. It's really just the ones where we weren't achieving our targets.
Yeah. And could you, sorry, through you, Mayor Wise, final question, could you refresh my memory around where the reporting against these figures comes through? Is that quarterly report?
Yes, quarterly report, and also just through our management accounting reports monthly, we look at it at an activity level or business unit level on what the funding splits should be for the activity and manage against that. But quarterly report, yes.
Quarterly report, yeah. Through you, I think in terms of discussion, I think it'd be really interesting to see against actual these changes, these variations. So, yeah, thank you.
Councillor McGrath and Councillor Price.
Just through the chair, I'd just like to carry on from the animal control side of things. For me, it's quite a big jump. When we did this initially, it was, who should pay? And this seems to be a big jump towards ratepayers away from that. What formula or evidence did we use to say there's more public good or public benefit and ratepayers should pay more towards animal control?
So part of it is the cost recovery that we can actually achieve from the activity over time, where legal costs and other aspects are increasing and we're not able to recover a lot of the costs through user charges. Also, I'll probably go to Rachel Bailey to help with that explanation. But cost recovery does highlight that issue, that we're not able to cover those costs for fees and charges as much as we set the target previously.
Could we get you to come up to a micro? Oh, here we go. There's one being handed to you. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think Alistair's answered it, and maybe I could expand on it a little bit in that there is a sort of a level at which you can reasonably expect dog owners to fully fund or partially fund this activity. And we know through the animal control team that the amount of activity that they are doing in general public safety is increasing year by year. And those dogs that they are having to work with usually, in some cases, are unowned, or ownership is difficult to find, or they're unregistered, and the owners have no intention of registering them. So they are often dangerous dogs and roaming our streets, and like any sort of public safety element, you know, there is a public good that comes from keeping that safe environment. And Lance just mentioned to me that there is one dog in the pound at the moment that's been in there for over 400 days, and has cost us $6,000. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the...
That's just in pound fees, not legal fees.
Just in pound fees, not legal fees. That money is unrecoverable from other areas. So, you know, there is a level of service to the public that we have to provide and have to fund. And I think, you know, I think we're at a point in which the fees become unaffordable for good dog owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Is this policy reviewed every 3 years, is it, or?
For the long-term plan it is. I think we have a look annually as part of the annual plan, I think as well, but 3 yearly for the long-term plan.
So if you've found a bit of a problem, you can
Yes.
change it each year. Thank you.
Did you have something to add to that, Gary? Or
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So in terms of the policy review, we are required to review it at least every 3 years, but whenever there's a material change that's required, we will present it to council. But given that it's a fundamental and quite important policy, it's something we prefer not to tinker with on a day-by-day basis.
Thank you. Councillor Crystal.
Just a question about the inner harbour. It's quite a big jump, and I know we've had some issues with bad debts and stuff in the inner harbour. So is this quite aspirational to achieve?
The change for Inner Harbour is just to reflect that we aren't actually funding it directly from ratepayers. It's being funded from the...
the harbour fund?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's more of just a changing how it's worded in the policy.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? If there's no questions, any general discussion before I ask for a mover and seconder? Could I have a mover and seconder then? Oh.
Or maybe it's a clarification, I'm not sure. I'm just checking the way that this was presented to us in workshop was that we weren't doing a full review of all of our costs, what's the word? A full review of our revenue and financing policy, and we were limiting our scope this time to the ones that we were unable to make, that we were unable to consistently make targets. Can I just confirm that that's the correct thing through you, Madam Mayor?
That's pretty much correct. So we budget the long-term plan in line with the policy, and if we see areas where we're struggling to meet those targets, we have addressed them. And we have a changing strategy for our business and tourism facilities, which we are operating a little more commercially. And so in the back of that, we need to change the revenue and financing policy to allow us to fund them a little bit differently.
And I guess just to add to that, recognising that we did an incredibly deep dive full review of this particular policy just a couple of years ago. I think that the approach that's been taken is appropriate at this point in time. There's no further questions. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, Councillor Crown. Any comments?
No further comments, thank you.
No. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? We'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And now on to the rates remission, rates postponement, remission and postponement of Māori freehold land and liability management policies review. And again, I think we will take the paper as read. Welcome, Gary, unless there was anything in particular that you would like to comment on.
Just briefly, I'd like to thank Councillor Bogue for mistaking me for my younger and better-looking colleague. It's a good start to the day.
I will open up to questions. So just firstly, a question from me, Gary. As we're not making any changes to these policies, does that mean we're not actually required to go out for consultation on them? This will actually be the adoption, or do they still go out for consultation?
Okay, because we're not making any changes, there's no consultation required because there's nothing to consult on.
Yep. Excellent. That's what I thought. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. And Councillor Bogue, I think you had a question?
Yes, I was quite intrigued by the rates postponement policy, which I hadn't been aware of before, and I thought at a time when we're looking at, increased rates, significantly increased rates, that it would be good for the public to get an understanding of that, because it obviously would help mitigate some of those costs for low-income households.
Of course. Through you, Madam Mayor. So the postponement policy effectively gives us a mechanism or a vehicle to delay or postpone the payment of rates by ratepayers. And we've got several mechanisms within that to do it. I think the one in particular that you're looking at, Councillor Bogue, is a postponement for older persons. And so with that particular part of the policy, it allows for ratepayers who are older on a fixed income, so typically New Zealand Super, are experiencing financial hardship, to be able to apply to council to postpone their rates. So on the surface, it can be a good offer, but there are quite a few conditions in there, and it's something that we do need to be very careful with when we do discuss it with potential applicants. So with this postponement, normally any ratepayers who are using a postponement, we require them to pay roughly about the first $500 of rates every year, and then postpone the balance. Now the balance, there's an annual fee involved of about $49, plus interest charged on the outstanding balance. And so, as you can imagine, in each successive year, the liability to pay those rates back will increase. And one of the things that council does do is take a charge over the property, similar to what a bank may do with a mortgage. And so we have had a few instances where people have decided to pay it back early, which is great. But normally the other instances where we would expect repayment back is if the property is sold, or if the property owner sort of has some sort of other arrangement, if they moved into other accommodation. They're also required to not have any other properties or investment properties available, and also to be able to provide evidence of that hardship. So given the nature of it, it's something that we would require or expect to speak to a specialist about, and also discuss with family too, because it's not a light decision to make. Not necessarily everybody in the family would be happy with it, but it is an avenue, especially where older people are struggling to meet their rates obligations. Yep.
Can I just supplementary, if I may? So for this particular postponement, you could postpone indefinitely, and then when, as you say, you move or you die, that the council gets the money back then off your estate.
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's correct, yes.
For eligibility, is there an asset threshold?
In terms of the threshold, really, it is around not owning any other properties. And if there's other investment assets that are providing an income to the property owner, then these are things that would be taken into consideration. But if it's quite minimal, what is being received, or the size of the asset is quite minimal, then we'll take that into consideration. So it's not a strict limit, but we would look at the nature of each applicant's situation in kind. So again, as I was saying, it's often it'll be a case of if somebody is asset rich in terms of they own their home, but they're not getting any income apart from, say, a New Zealand super, then that's the typical applicant would be looking at. Yeah.
And number-wise, have we had very many applicants for this?
At present, we have got two people that are using the postponement. I think in the last 5 years, we've maybe had 5 total, and one of those opted to repay it back after a couple of years.
Okay. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind me asking him something about rates rebate, which is similar. Well, it's not similar, but it does affect people of low income who have houses. Could you just explain to us what the rates rebate involves? I know it's not our policy, it's run by central government, etc.
Of course. So I don't have all the figures in front of me for the thresholds and such, but typically people on lower incomes can make an application. It's a government application form, but we process and manage it on behalf of the government, where each year put in an application and a rebate is provided of several $100s to successful applicants to offset the burden of their rates effectively. Yeah.
And if you'll excuse me, another question. Do many people actually take advantage of that?
Many.
That's good.
It's widely known.
And it's at the end of June, isn't it, that they start making the applications?
That's
for that financial
correct.
year?
I believe I'd need to get the exact dates on that, but yes, and there's normally a window to apply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Taylor.
Just to carry on this discussion around the postponement, in the actual policy, it says this policy will not affect any rates postponement provisions approved prior to July 2009. So is there a separate policy that was in place before 2009 that some people have taken advantage of?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's a grandfathering clause in there, but there is nobody that is still on that. And I think it's one we could probably safely remove, but we've had no call to at this point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? No, so could I have a mover that we approve these 4 policies? Thank you, Councillor Bogue, seconded by Councillor Crystal. Would you like to speak to that?
No, just they're all existing policies and they're just rolling over. I'm sure we're quite satisfied that they tick all the boxes, so yes.
Thank you. Councillor Crystal?
No, I'm fine.
Any further councillors? So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
And moving on to our next policy, being the draft significance and engagement policy and approach to consultation. And we have Anne coming up to talk to this paper.
Hello again. Would you like a brief summary, or do you want to take the paper as read?
Read.
Happy to take as read. I think there's just been some quite minor changes to the policy based on my read of it. So I'll open up for any questions from councillors. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Look, generally supportive of the minor changes, but I note that the updated draft refers to an iwi engagement policy, and I couldn't quite remember us having one.
It's the iwi engagement policy is in draft. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Morahu, but it hasn't been approved by council yet, has it? So I'll just keep talking while Morahu's getting his microphone.
No, it hasn't been, but it was given to community services to add to the current policy.
So the significance and engagement policy is a legislative requirement that all councils have to do. The council currently does not have an engagement policy, which is how we engage with our communities. We follow best practice, IAP2, but we don't have that policy. So in the second half of this year, we'll be looking at creating an engagement policy for council, which will work with this iwi engagement policy. So we will bring that back to you later in the year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions? I have a mover and seconder. Councillor Greig and Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Any comments? No?
No, makes sense. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Anne. Right, so we've dealt with all the supporting policies, which will form part of our 3-year plan consultation. So now we're up to the adoption of the 3-year plan consultation document. And we have Steph, Danica, Caroline, anyone else? Jess? Come on. The more the merrier.
Go.
Yeah. Welcome. The A team, or the 3-year plan team.
Glad Jess has covered some colours, or else it was very black.
It was, wasn't it?
Like a demon funeral. Funeral.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to the team just to take us through a couple of very brief slides, but just wanted to recognise the significance of the program of work that's gone into getting us here today, and to thank the huge effort of the team that's been involved, and also the work that's happened between elected members and the staff. So that was really all I wanted to say, and that this is a significant moment, I think, for all of us here. And I'll hand over to you, Danica, to take us through.
Cool. Thanks, Jess. Hello, everyone. So yeah, as Jess says, it's quite a significant milestone, so just thought we could highlight some key points. So as everyone is aware, due to SWIRL, we're producing an unaudited 3-year plan with a recovery focus in place of a long-term plan this time. So this also means that there's no requirement to audit the consultation document, which is why the document that we are presenting today doesn't have an audit report. The LGA requires council use the special consultative procedure to consult with the community before adopting the final plan. This process involves the adoption of a consultation document which presents the community with the information they need to provide feedback on what council is proposing. So the reason we're here today is to present council with the consultation document and the supporting information for adoption. And then following adoption, community consultation will begin on the 25th of March and run through to the 26th of April. So I'll just quickly cover off the key consultation topics for our plan. They've been grouped just to show which of council's strategic priorities they primarily relate to. So they're all in the slide, and I'll just run through them. We've got the future of council housing, a change to business and tourism facilities, fees and charges, the creation of a council-controlled trading organisation, the rates increase, the resilience rate, and then Napier City Council's office accommodation. So there's a lot of content that sits with each topic, which I won't run through here, but all of the details along with council's preferred option can be found in the consultation document. And there's also extra information around additional topics in the document that don't require consultation. So just a bit of an update for the community on those. As mentioned earlier by Anne, Alistair and Paulina, consultation on the proposed amendments to our significance and engagement policy, the revenue and financing policy, and our financial contributions policy will run concurrently with our 3-year plan consultation. And also just wanted to note that while we will be consulting on housing as part of the 3-year plan, it's got its own engagement stream, which Anne also touched on earlier. Just onto some key dates. So we're obviously here to adopt the consultation document. just noting that the visual design and the layout of the document is still under development. So that just means that while the content will be the same, the version that goes out when consultation starts will look nicer than what we're presenting today. And we'll have a visually designed version ready to circulate with elected members sometime next week. As previously mentioned, consultation starts on the 25th of March, and from this date we'll also be delivering mailers to every letterbox in Napier, and the mailer will just summarise the consultation document content and then also encourage the community to head to Say at Napier to find out more details. The community will also be encouraged to submit online through Say at Napier, and if they need a hand with online submissions, they can head into the customer service centre or the libraries, and we'll be able to get a hand there. Following the closure of the consultation period, the consultation closes on the 26th of April, and then hearings and deliberations will begin on the 27th of May. So this just provides submitters with the chance to speak to their submission, and council will consider all feedback from the community before any final decisions are made on the plan. And then from there, the plan will be adopted on the 27th of June. And just before we jump into questions, I just need to note that there is an error on page 327 of the open attachments under separate cover 1. So that's just in relation to the financial information attachment that's a supporting document for this paper. It was the Rangatira revetment rate, and it should be noted as $348.86, not $14. And 14 properties will be charged that rate. And this is just a design error, so it doesn't impact any of the figures. And an updated version will be used for community consultation. So that's all from me. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thank you very much. And before I open for questions, I just want to acknowledge the incredibly hard work that has been undertaken by you and all your team, and touch on where we've landed with the proposed rates increase that we're consulting on. So we do have a proposed rates increase of 23.7%, which is, of course, the highest proposed rates increase as a council that we have ever put out for consultation. And I know we started with the first draft of the 3-year plan that was pulled together at 43%. So to find 20% through the work that's been led by your team is absolutely incredible, and thank you for the efforts of everybody that has achieved that. And I know there will be many in our community who are surprised and not happy with the proposed rates increase that we are asking them to provide feedback to us on, and we encourage everybody to provide their feedback. But just to give some context to that figure, and I have been speaking about this quite publicly for quite some time, because I do think it's really important for our community to understand the position that we as a council, and in fact councils throughout the whole country, find ourselves in with the ever-increasing pressures that we have on our financial position. And obviously here in Hawke's Bay at the moment, we have the additional impact of Cyclone Gabrielle and the ongoing recovery to that. All councils are dealing with a new government and the ongoing uncertainty around all manner of reforms which are still in play, and not knowing quite how they might impact on our future financial sustainability. And I guess just to touch on a few areas of where costs have grown exponentially in recent years, as the Deputy Mayor discussed earlier, bridges have increased by 38%. Roads and water supply systems are 27% more expensive to build than they were 3 years ago. Sewage systems are 30% more expensive to build than they were 3 years ago. And these are all parts of our core infrastructure that we're responsible for providing to our community. And we face the same cost pressures that every household and every business faces. We have the inflationary pressures, insurance, which I know everybody is struggling with. My own personal insurances went up by 35% in the last 12 months. Rising wage costs are something that are a significant part of our increase this year, proposed increase this year. And we haven't actually introduced any new activities or increased any levels of service except for a 2% resilience fund. And after what we have been through in the last 12 months, I think it's incredibly important that we do continue to invest and have funds available to build resilience and to prepare ourselves for any future events that may hit our community in the foreseeable future. So I'm very much looking forward to taking this consultation document out to our community, receiving submissions. There are a number of key items that we're asking for feedback on. There is, of course, our housing portfolio, which we discussed at length in the earlier paper. We're also, as I said, the resilience rate of 2%. We're asking for feedback on that. We're looking to implement an investment strategy which actually allows us to view some of our assets with a more commercial lens. So we're asking for feedback in terms of how we implement that strategy and set up a council-controlled trading organisation to have a focus on how we best get the best return from those assets. There are a number of fees and charges which we have increased beyond CPI, which we're wanting to hear feedback on. Off the top of my head, that includes parking, it includes Ocean Spa, it includes the business activity of Napier conferences and events. So that is one of our consultation items. Our business and tourism loan funding, again, so we have done a review of some of our facilities which do have a very strong business and tourism focus, and how we can actually reimagine or look at how those facilities are operated, so that, again, they have potentially just a slightly more commercial focus and how we can get the best return from those. That will take a period of time. We're thinking between 1 and 3 years. And so we are consulting on loan funding, any deficit on those facilities, whilst we work through that process of looking at how we change them to be more financially viable going into the future. And then we also have a question regarding our civic office accommodation and what we're proposing there with the old library tower and, again, refurbishing that to get all of our staff back on one site in the next few years as well. So there's lots of information in the document. There's lots of things we need feedback on, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our community, and just, again, want to acknowledge all the hard work that's been put in to date. So that was a bit of a ramble, but I thought it was important to sort of provide that context. And I will just open up for any questions that councillors have. Councillor Price.
One that's just sort of come to me, the Resilience Fund, where does that stop? Does it go forever, or?
This would be putting it in as a permanent ongoing fund, yes. So it's not just for a one-off year, which is what we had last year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, Madam Mayor, just following up from Councillor Price's question, what's the criteria for using the Resilience Fund? I know we had it last year, we had something like that. How is it going to be used? Are there criteria that have to be met in order to activate that fund?
So the fund will be used for resilience planning, planning around our infrastructure to make sure it's more resilient in the event of another disaster. Any unspent funds would go into a reserve, so it's ring-fenced. So it's only to be spent on items relating to resilience.
Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Crystal. I guess one of my things that I picked up all the way through this is the reference to Napier Conferences events as a facility, which it's an activity. And in the paper and the fees and charges, it's Napier Conferences and events. The War Memorial is referred to as that, whereas if people were going to look for fees and charges, they're in the War Memorial. So I guess I want to know how that
is communicated. And also the ballroom is now the Natush ballroom. So there's just this kind of because it's the activity that happens in here, but in the fees and charges, this building's referred to as Ngāpuhi Citizen Bench. Have we got any? Before this goes out and we get absolutely slammed by the community.
So is that just it's not a question, it's just a clarification for us to confirm a consistency through the document, for us to go back and check?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah,
We'll
just
note that down.
Yeah, I just know it's quite an emotive issue.
Yeah.
Of how that's referred to.
Thank you. We'll go through and do some checking.
Yeah, it will just also when they talk about the facilities and that we're going for full commercial, it talks about facilities like Kennedy Park, and the facility is Ngāpuhi conferences and events, where it's the activity.
The activity is conferences and events, as opposed to the...
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, I'm happy to move from the chair. If I could have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Price. And I think I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say earlier, so there's no further comments from me, except it's great to move through this next gateway. Councillor Price.
No, I think you've pretty well said it all. I think well done by the staff doing all the work, and I think all the councillors getting in behind it and supporting it. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I do support the resolution, but I'm very reluctant to support such a huge rates increase because I'm particularly concerned about people struggling with the cost of living crisis and the possible implication it has for renters when the landlords are paying a significant larger amount of rates. I do appreciate the fact that our rates have traditionally been lower than many other cities, and now I guess this is catch-up time. And I suppose we're paying for underspending in some of our assets over the years. So, and I would suggest to the public that if they've got suggestions on how we could reduce that amount, then I recommend they submit them to us and come and speak to us about them.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Councillor Price.
I just want to clarify the point to Councillor Bogue that this is a consultation document, so we're laying our cards on the table for the public to come back to us with any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess just to close off with my right of reply, I also want to acknowledge the courage being shown by our elected members around the table. I know it hasn't been an easy position for us to arrive at to consult on a 23.7% rates increase, but I think we also understand the need for that. And I agree with Councillor Bogue. I encourage community members who may have ideas or may wish to see a reduction in levels of service in particular areas to come to us with that. We then need to go through an additional process. If you do bring us your ideas, we would then have to do further consultation. So it's not something that we could implement as part of this particular 3-year plan, but it would certainly be something that we could pick up and look to include as part of the next annual plan process if we did receive some really great ideas from our community. So please reach out and let us know your thoughts. Thank you very much. So that being us, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 9 is the Mayoral Relief Fund distributions and an update from Talia. Thank you very much, Talia. Yeah. I was like, oh, we've got music.
In that case, we'll just ignore the slideshow. I had collected some photos, but I can distribute those around to everybody after the meeting rather than trying to talk along to the music. So firstly, I had expected that this would be the last presentation to Council on the Mayoral Relief Fund. However, in the last week, we have received some more inquiries about donations. So we are expecting at least one further donation to come through. The paper does talk about any further donations being held for future events. However, I would like to propose an additional recommendation to make a change to that. So the additional recommendation is that Council approve the Napier City Council Cyclone Gabrielle event, February 2023. Mayoral Relief Fund remains open for donations for Cyclone Gabrielle relief. Any donations received for this purpose will still be eligible for tax credits, subject to inland revenue requirements, and funds will be distributed in the same manner as previously. Now, I do have some updates about the distributions that we have made. As I said, I'll distribute the photos after this, but the fund has supported events with attendance in the hundreds or potentially thousands, including the opening of a tool library in Bayview, the library now being up to 250 completed loans so far. A resilience talk with Dr. Lucy Hone, which was well received with 180 attendees. There were a number of returnees who had seen Lucy on previous visits, as well as a good number of people who were delighted at the opportunity to come and hear from a couple who had lived through their own family trauma, as well as the devastation of the earthquake in Christchurch. A ladies' night in Estelle, which was attended by over 100 women who each received a glass of champagne on arrival, a free ticket and the spot prizes for over 80 items, a fabulous dinner, a styling presentation from Raspberry Beret, followed by the ladies selecting from a huge range of free Augustine clothing. And many evenings at the Dinner Club, which still regularly hosts between 30 to 40 attendees who lost their home to the cyclone. Some other initiatives funded include an app by Radio Hawke's Bay, providing a new emergency broadcast system to provide reliable, detailed and timely information to residents during disasters. The system leverages existing AM/FM radio infrastructure and adds a unique digital platform for information gathering and sharing. The app was released on 14th February this year and can be found by searching Radio Hawke's Bay in the app stores for both Apple and Android users. A community garden to incorporate a remembrance of the event and strength and resilience of the Bayview and Estelle community. The community now have the seat design and garden design finalised, and they're about to apply for further funding needed to start the project off after getting the final quotes. A basketball court in Bayview, with our team internally stating, "I drive past the park and visit it multiple times a week, so can confirm that many local children and their families use this hoop regularly." So I see it as being a very successful and necessary asset for our Bayview community post the cyclone. The opening hosted roughly 30 people, including children from Esview Play Centre, where the after-school program runs. The fund covered 12 weeks accommodation for the clean-up crew, supported by Bayview Community Charitable Trust, and the team is still working their way through the Pack and Save vouchers purchased due to being very thrifty. This funding has helped with this incredible group of people not being out of pocket while providing the most amazing service to the community. We've also funded 2 books, a children's story book about a lucky little pig in the cyclone, which is with the illustrator now and expected to be on sale in June, and the Dinner Club cookbook, which was gifted to all Dinner Club members on the anniversary of the cyclone and has sold over 200 copies to the public. Profits from the cookbook are being reinvested back to the club, and they hope to also gift people welcome home kits to stock pantries when they move into their rebuilt homes. To purchase a copy, you can go to the website, thedinnerclub-hb.com. And these are just some of the initiatives covered. In total, 172 individuals, families or community groups have directly received funding. However, many, many more have benefited from the events and initiatives that we've funded. I'd also like to pass on my thanks, and I'm sure the thanks from the rest of the organisation and community, to the people behind these events and initiatives who have invested countless hours to ensure their success. After all, there's only a certain amount the money itself can help. Without these people, there wouldn't have been anything for us to support. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Talia, for that update, and it's wonderful to hear about how some of the funds were used for the benefit of our community. Any questions from councillors? And just noting that there is that addition of B, noting we are aware there are some funds coming in specifically donated for Cyclone Gabrielle, so we're retaining the ability to be able to claim the tax credit and distribute those. There's no questions or discussion. Councillor
Would it
Bowe.
be possible to put the amended resolution? Are we amending the resolution?
We are.
Thank you.
There we go. If there's no questions or discussion, could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Bogue, Councillor Crystal, thank you. Would you like to talk to that?
Thank you very much for your report, Talia, and it's great to know that that fund has affected so many affected families. So, and it's good that we're keeping it open as well, and hopefully there will be more donations and more opportunities to support those people who are still suffering the effects of Cyclone Gabrielle.
Excellent. Councillor Crystal.
Yes, thanks, Talia. It was really good to get some feedback, and this fund is a great fund that went directly to the people that really needed it, which I think people saw as a really positive way to donate and see some results, and people still do need it. It might be a year on, but it's going to be many years before people actually return to a new normal. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And I know we're approaching the 2-hour mark, but Talia is the presenter for the next paper as well for the quarterly report. So I think we'll do this one and then we'll take a short break. So we're there, and welcome, Caroline. So our December 2023 quarterly report.
Yes, thank you. So this quarterly report provides detail of our financial performance and service performance for the 3 months to 31 December 2023. The year-to-date net operating shortfall of 8.2 million is favourable to the budgeted deficit of 16.1 million. That is due to several revenue items which are above budget and expenditure items below budget. But the one in particular that I'd like to highlight is the employee benefit expense. That's because this has had a significant change from the annual plan figures. So while we are projecting to meet our revised budget, the revised budget is above the budget in the annual plan. We're also preparing a forecast at the moment to project out to 30 June 2024. It does show that employee benefit line should be met. However, the revenue and offsetting expenditure that was intended to cover that additional budget may not be achieved. We also, that forecast will be going to the Prosperous meeting later this month. The capital position, we did have a very large, ambitious capital plan for this year, and we are looking to achieve around half of it. Again, the official figures will be in the forecast, but it is looking around the $50 million mark. Thank you. Oh, sorry, there's also one image in the document which needs to be fixed before we publish it on the website. That's on page 68, so we will correct. It's got a placeholder over the top of it at the moment. We will correct that. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. Open up for any questions from councillors. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a finicky one from me. So in the water supply performance summary, one of the targets is identified as, I think, being overly optimistic, perhaps. And I just what I want to understand is how do we set these targets? Because they've linked it to a review to the long-term plan. How do we review these targets if we think that they are overly optimistic? What is the process involved in it, and how often can it occur?
It does only occur with the long-term plan. They are going through that process internally at the moment to reset those. That is the measures themselves as well as the targets, although I think that one, the measure itself is a mandatory measure, so we can't change that. We can only change the target for that one. So the officers will be doing that at the moment, and I believe that would come back to council with the final long-term plan.
Thank you. And just supplementary. And so that is across the entire organisation with these performance measures? That's the trigger, is the 3-year plan? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Any discussion? Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Oh, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor McGrath. Would you like to speak to that?
No, thank you for the report. Made very interesting reading. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
No, I'm all good, thanks.
Any other speakers? And I guess from my perspective, looking forward to receiving the year-end forecast on the 28th of March. I guess that will give us a really clear view of how we're tracking through to the end of the financial year. So I will put the motion that we receive the quarterly report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and we will take a 5-minute break. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. We will continue with our open agenda, and agenda item 11 is the Ombudsman Report, Council Meeting and Workshop Recommendations. Welcome to Anna, who's going to present the paper to us.
Kia ora koutou. I'll take the report as read, but just note some key points for you. Last year in October, the Ombudsman released a report on an investigation he'd done into 5 councils and looking at local council meetings and workshops. So from that, we've done an analysis to find out where we could improve our practices to comply with his recommendations. The key issues he highlighted were whether council workshops should be held in public or public excluded, if workshops are to be made public, how that should be done, how councils decide that meetings or workshops should be held in public excluded, public accessibility, so that's in person but also online, being able to access information, and the need for training for staff and elected members around these matters. So the key issue for workshops is whether they should be held in public or public excluded, and our practice to date has been that they are all public excluded by default. But the Ombudsman has made it clear that this is not acceptable. So in response, it's proposed that the default setting for workshops is changed and all workshops are open to the public unless they're covered by one of the relevant grounds in section 6 or 7 of the LGOIMA, Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. And a question flows on from that, as our Audit and Risk Committee meetings are the only committee meetings we are not live streaming, whether we should treat those the same as workshops, the open part of them. So looking at how we can make workshops more public, we can follow a lot of the same steps as we do for our meetings, advertising them in advance, giving the topics, the venues, that sort of stuff. And there were several options we considered for making workshops available to the public. The most cost-effective option for Napier would be to audio-visually record a workshop and publish that to the website, like we do for the live stream meetings. We have a YouTube channel, put them on there, have an obvious link on the website so public can access that. And along with those recordings, have any relevant documentation such as PowerPoint presentations or notes taken from the workshops. The other area that was highlighted in the Ombudsman's report that we at Napier City Council could improve on is releasing public excluded material to the public. The Ombudsman noted that councils should consistently revisit public excluded material to consider whether it can be released in the future after a significant event or a certain time period. I've arranged some training through the Ombudsman's office, and this training is free for elected members and staff, and they'll go over the fundamentals of the LGOIMA Act and how we should be treating information and making it accessible to the public. So through that training and through a lot of background admin processes, we'll develop a process to release public excluded information when it's appropriate out into the public arena via our website. Simpson Grierson has stated that the Ombudsman's recommendations are just that, recommendations. They're not legal requirements. However, each recommendation should be weighted against Napier City Council's ability to implement them. And changing the approach for workshops in particular does have some financial impacts. It's also quite a change for elected members and staff going forward. As standing orders do not apply in workshops, we'll develop some guidelines to support the chair of a workshop and staff. And it may be that in future items considered in workshops, it may make more sense for them to go straight to a meeting rather than going to a workshop first. So the attachment to the report is a very broad timeline for implementing changes. But as I said, there's quite a lot of admin stuff to happen in the background and some training and support documents to be created. So it's going to be a staged approach to this. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I guess I'm just looking at the attachment that you've got here, because what I was particularly interested in terms of timing was around the workshop guidelines and the template for workshop notes. And so when were we expecting that they would be in play?
So in terms of guidelines, we have started that work. Hoping that will be able to be out to people as soon as possible. Sort of looking at the Ombudsman's training as supporting some of that work, be able to use some of that content, it's as soon as possible sort of situation for that. The minutes template, our view is that we wouldn't be doing full minutes as we do for a meeting. It would just be more key points, key actions that have come out of the workshop, a brief summary, so that we're not placing more burden on officers to get that done. So the template, again, is something we'll start to work on once we know the outcome of this meeting, and get that implemented as soon as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
And my question is purely for clarification, is that we're looking to audio-visual record, but not live stream the actual workshop. So it's available post the workshop,
yes,
but not live stream.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
There we go, microphone on. Oh, I'm about to talk to that too. One of my concerns, or one of the issues I'm interested in teasing out a little bit more is in the recommendation point B2, around that audio-visual recording and publication of the council workshops. So you mentioned that it was one of our most cost-effective ways for us to go public. I'm interested in, and the paper I note says that it's really hard to quantify what those costs are at this point, so not wanting to put you too much on the spot, but I'm wondering what our legislative requirements are around data storage, because as the wife of a man who owns a filmmaking company, I understand that's one of the key things is data storage of video is exceptionally expensive. So have we looked into those costs at all yet?
No. The meeting recordings are on a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if there's a cost associated with that. It's something I could find out.
Yeah, I don't think we've
gone through that exercise and that level of detail, but that's a good point that you've raised. I think I think this is kind of an iterative process in terms of us understanding what the length of those, the size of the files are going to be, how many we're going to have each year. We're not sure whether these changes that we're implementing are going to have an impact on whether we have less workshops and we might actually take more content through committee meetings. So I think for us, it's probably a case of we're thinking that this will be a start, and we're probably going to have to go through, have a review process probably in 12 months' time. And I think they're really good points that you raise. We'll probably come back to you in 12 months with a bit of a review of the process in terms of what are some of those costs that are associated. And then we can probably make some further decisions around going forward, next steps, as we further implement either fine-tune the process as we go forward.
Through the Mayor, currently we have obviously the wonderful John setting up the room for us for meetings with all the gear, and so it's ideal to hold workshops after meetings because then there's just the one cost for the day, the same with the venue hire. So it's possibly going to help streamline, although the workshops haven't been too bad this year, I don't think, in terms of days they're held on, but we won't be wanting to have a lot of individual hours here and there if we're having to get sound gear set up and that sort of thing.
Anna, just to clarify from me, was an option that we would just effectively record on a Teams meeting some of the workshops as opposed to having to bring somebody in to record them if they were a separate meeting which weren't sort of concurrently running to a council meeting?
Yes, so the IT guys here at the War Memorial Centre can help us with recording via Zoom. So that would be included in the room hire if that's the way we decided to go. That would be part of the room hire costs.
Have you got a follow-up question from you?
Yep.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, have we thought about the extra benefit that we get from video that we could get from audio? Sorry, I'm not writing it very well. If we could do just an audio recording, but the recommendation is video, what's the sort of benefit that is being seen to do video rather than just audio?
I suppose then people that are watching and are interested can see who said what, I suppose, rather than trying to distinguish voices.
Councillor Crystal. Just back to you doing that all on one day. We had a little conversation before, but in my experience, by the time we get to 4 o'clock, our workshops aren't particularly as effective as they are in the morning. So that would just be one thing to keep in mind.
Yep, that's a fair comment. Yep, thank you.
Councillor McGrath, then Councillor Simpson.
Through the chair, just a couple of questions here. Have we received any guidelines or advice from Local Government New Zealand?
They organised a webinar with Simpson Grierson, and that's where Simpson Grierson said essentially the recommendations the Ombudsman has come out with are just recommendations. However, if councils do not comply, then it's not going to be looked on very favourably by the Ombudsman. LGNZ obviously supports that advice. Lots of different councils have approached this in different ways. I think the important thing is to show that we're trying to work with what the Ombudsman has recommended, even if we don't go full hog, live streaming everything, publishing everything, as long as we're trying to be more transparent and open to our public. And as Jess said, this is sort of the first step, and we are planning to do a review a bit further in to see how things are working and whether we need to tweak things.
Yeah. And just continuing on, first step, this looks like full hog to me. And I'm just wondering if there's consequences the other way. Not everyone wants to be in front of a camera, and I'm sure with the 600 staff or so we employ, there'd be a whole lot of them for a whole lot of different reasons who don't want to be in front of a camera. And, you know, it's not easy getting staff in the current environment. And I'm just wondering, A, how we'd get on with that, and B, and this is almost jumping to the other side, what's in people's contracts as far as what they're expected to do for council, as far as getting in front of a camera that's recorded forever, out on YouTube, forever and a day?
Yep.
How's that covered for us?
Anna? That's a good point.
So through the chair, I'm quite happy to answer that. Obviously, we would be more than happy if a member of staff was uncomfortable not to put them in that place, but that's not an issue that's been raised with us at this time. But should it be, would absolutely consider the appropriateness of that staff member being involved. But as you see from what we've had in the past, you tend to see the similar staff members presenting on different papers. But if it was ever an issue, we would absolutely take into account their preferences.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Oh, just some general discussion through you. Mayor-wise, I completely support the officer's recommendation. I often, over the years, have thought how beneficial it would be for the full discussion that we have at workshops to be visible to our community. We quite often get to a point of decision-making having already sought clarification and comment and thought about the issues in an in-depth way, and that usually starts with a workshop. So I'm really supportive of the recommendations, and if I reflect Mayor-wise on the paper we put together when you were first elected, this looks very similar to what we were talking about internally around how to increase transparency of what we talk about at workshops. So I've got a great deal of comfort for that. I just note in response to the question Councillor McGrath raised and the answer from the Chief Executive, you will see in the recommendations that there is a ability in B to hold a part of a workshop in public excluded for any of the grounds in Section 6 and 7 of LAGOIMA, and the protection of privacy of natural persons is one of those. So we do have the ability to keep workshops in public excluded if, for instance, there was a requirement to keep the privacy of people presenting to us in that public excluded space. So, yeah, just general discussion from me, feeling really comfortable, quite happy with the recommendations, and think it will be a great step forward for us showing our full consideration of issues to community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, I concur with the Deputy Mayor's commentary. I think this is great, actually, because we are working on behalf of our community. A lot of our activities in the past have been, that secrecy or perceived mystique. At least now, our residents will understand how much time we actually put into our decision-making processes and how much time this business or this part of our engagement actually takes us away from some of the other work that we're doing. More importantly, it'll remove some of the mystique around how we've reached our conclusion and what actually ends up on an agenda paper. And I think there have been times where we have commented, we've had 37 workshops to get to this point, and the residents just are unaware of that level of workload to get something to a committee resolution. So I think this is really important. I think how we do it is really important. My only concern, looking at the timetable of implementation, is around the training. That seems to be happening after we go live effectively, so I'm a little bit concerned about particularly the public excluded componentry, and I think we will have to trust the ELT between now and then to make sure that we've got good guidance and appropriate course of actions in those points. But no, I certainly fully endorse this. It's something we should be doing. And, as I say, we're simply working for the ratepayer, and if they want to sit and watch all the workshops, they're all more than welcome to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And with regards to that training, I do recall seeing it in our calendars. Can you recall?
Yes, it is, I think, the 9th of
9th of April.
So that will be the Ombudsman's training from their Jane and I are anticipating we may need to do some one-on-ones, and as this sort of rolls out and officers are booking workshops, discussing with them the reasons, if they think it should be in public excluded, why that is, and how we can justify that under the Act. So, yeah, it's sort of going to be an ongoing thing. Hopefully at some point we will, as we've got in the plan, some dedicated training, and we can actually sit down with groups of people, and especially new staff members, and work through it with them.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Madam Mayor, I'm not going to be debating this, but I've just got a question about B4, facilitating public attendance at council workshops. Would they be able to bring their phone and record anything or take photographs?
What we will be putting in the guidelines is similar to what we have for a meeting. So, as you would have seen on the sign outside the door there, if anybody wants to make a recording, they need to get the permission of the chair. Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just for discussion. I personally don't have a problem with being video recorded at work. I think it's part of our job, and I've got no personal issues with it. I agree with all of the points in the recommendation. I still have a concern around, or I do have a concern around B2, and it's not around the, like on the surface, I think that looks like a simple thing to do. I have concerns around the cost of that, and whether the cost will match the benefit to our community. The Ombudsman's recommendations, they're the strangest list of recommendations I've ever seen. I feel like they're more like points for consideration, and they're phrased as questions. So at no point in his report could I see that they recommended that we audio-visually recorded our meetings. I take it that that is our interpretation of his phrasing of things for consideration. So the how is one of the things that we get to decide today. I understand that transparency is the objective, and I consider there are other, probably more cost-effective ways to enable that transparency. Just thinking through some of the things that we, like where I have those concerns around cost, the cost of, like, I'm interested to know if we have recorded our workshops, whether we have a legal requirement under Lagoima to be able to produce that. Because if we publish our videos on YouTube, we no longer own that information. That is YouTube's property, not ours. So I'm interested in whether we have a legal right to, or a legal obligation to hold that on our servers ourselves. There is other ways of doing it, and I consider, like we could, sorry, my list of costs. If we were to do, as you suggested, the increased level of transparency is around people being able to identify who's speaking. If we have simply a Teams meeting style camera, that's not going to fulfill that aim. It's still going to be very hard in a big room with a small camera looking at us to be able to see who's speaking. In order to achieve that level of standard, we would need to invest quite heavily in equipment ourselves, or contract John in or another provider in to provide that for ourselves, and that equipment is not cheap. I do think, however, we're probably going to need an upgrade of our microphones in different rooms. So there is going to be a cost to increasing our technology in this step, regardless of which way we go. I think there are ways of doing that with technology that would still meet the Ombudsman's aim around transparency, our role to provide that transparency to our public without having to publish 2, 3, 4 hour long videos. And if we're looking at cost to benefit relationship, like maybe I'm slightly less optimistic than Councillor Simpson that many people would sit through a 3 to 4 hour video and actually get the benefit that this will cost the ratepayer. There are ways with technology that you can get you can easily get a transcript of meetings. AI can identify who is speaking based off our voice now and give full transcripts that we could keep as a data file, just a text file online, and then we can just provide little summaries from that. It could be as simple as a couple of clicks, and we could produce. So I really like the idea of the publication of our workshop material, and with that we could really simply put a summary, a text summary with it of what happened. We could keep that transcript on file, which would be legitimable for anyone who wants to know exactly who said what. And I think that is probably a level of service that I would be more comfortable with for our community. And then, as you say, we are going to review this in 12 months. So maybe at that point we review whether we need to go that next level and include the visual part of this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Are you essentially putting forward a substantive motion to remove B2?
Yes, or to amend it to be I'm happy to take advice on this, but maybe it could be a text recording and publication.
And did you want to do that for C as well, for the audit and risk?
Oh no, I think C makes complete sense. That's one of our committee meetings where we're actually making decisions. So I think that makes complete sense.
Can I suggest that perhaps B2 would be amended to text or audio-visual recording? So that then still leaves that option of audio-visual as we work through this process over the next 12 months. And when we do feel that it's appropriate to have an audio-visual recording, we could do that. But if we feel that a text recording would be adequate, we'd have the option to do that.
Yeah, more than happy with that.
Yep. Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Okay, so I'm happy to move from the chair since I've made that change to, so it really is just saying adding in the word text or audio-visual recording is the extent of the change. Do I have a second, Councillor Brown?
Just a quick clarification too.
Yep.
Just wondering, do the staff need direction on what would be our norm then in this? Like our expectations around when we would do text versus audio?
I don't know that we need to provide that direction in today's meeting. I think that can be part of the overall guidelines that are being developed around the process.
Brilliant.
Councillor Bogue.
Just a question about that amendment. Would that meet the requirements specified in the Ombudsman's report?
Yeah.
Well, as I said previously, any step we make towards being more open and transparent will be a bonus. Okay. If our sense from his findings was live streaming would be top notch, but obviously, yeah.
There's a cost.
And bearing in mind also, in a few years we'll have a nice new chambers that has equipment that hopefully can be left set up all the time. That will reduce some of the cost.
So as the mover, I just want to say I completely embrace this. Being open and transparent, it has been something that I have certainly supported from day one of being on council. And as Councillor Simpson said earlier, we do often refer to these workshops when we're in a committee meeting. So even if the community hasn't chosen to watch the workshops prior, it may pique their interest if they then participate or view a committee meeting, and then it provides them with the opportunity to go and actually look on our website and find the workshops to provide them with additional information which has contributed to our decision making. So very, very happy to support the motion. Councillor Brown.
I think I've said enough. I support the motion.
Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor Brosnan?
Yeah, I'm hearing the discussion from Councillor Brown, and I guess trying to marry it with my expectation around transparency through reading the paper, and I think I've come to a position where I don't support text over video, and so I probably don't support the amendment, but support the substantive, the original motion recommendation. So from my perspective, I was just thinking it through, and I think it's easier to engage with video, and we've already acknowledged that we're going to have probably an engagement barrier to people anyway in terms of the time in a workshop. So I think it's easier to engage with the video. It's how our community is used to engaging with us. We've been live streaming for a while now. So I do think there's probably an expectation here. We are just doing it for 1 year. So in my mind, that would be a great opportunity to review some of the key issues raised around the cost, the number of views of videos, etc., which I think would be harder to gauge if it was a text file, the number of people who had read it, for instance. And I just think we should go into setting the standard. We've had the expectation from the Ombudsman that possibly live streaming is the gold standard. We're not quite there, but it sounds to me like we'd take a couple of steps back. So I didn't follow that line of thinking around the ownership of YouTube and Lagoima, knowing Lagoima, once it's released, it's released. So who owns that, technically who owns that file, I don't think is a matter for consideration. So yeah, I'm not thinking like the cost is going to be too significant over what we're already spending in this space, and it just feels like a step back for me. So not supporting the amendment, but supporting the original recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Gregg, then Councillor McGrath.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you. I'd just like to support what Deputy Mayor Brosnan has just said. I think in the interest of simplicity, we do need to see who said what, and that could be mixed up if it was just text. How would you know? So we need absolutely clearly to see who is speaking and what's being said. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Yes, through the chair, if you'll indulge me, please, I have perhaps a couple of questions that have popped into mind.
Yes.
When we talk workshops, are we also steering groups and meetings like that? Or is it, how do you define a workshop as opposed to, say, a group of councillors and externals getting together and talking about a library or what goes in a library or something? Will they all be streamed and as well? Where's the cutoff?
Very good question.
Damn.
Through the Mayor, I suppose for this purpose, our definition of a workshop would be something that has been put forward by officers through, we have a workshop approval form. So the officers have put their proposal for a workshop through their executive director and the chief executive and the mayor before we book it in. So something that's gone through that process in that form would be considered a councillor workshop. And on that form, we're amending it to enable people to add public excluded reasons if they're required.
Seems still very weird. And just a second question, if for some reason on the day the video wasn't working, would we have to cancel the workshop?
I wouldn't think so.
If we exclude text as an option, or the Wi-Fi is down or something.
I think I can probably answer that question. It's not mandatory that we record our workshops, so these are improvements to the process that we're currently operating. So it's best endeavours, I think, to improve our process in terms of being transparent. So I don't think we would have to cancel a meeting if the recording equipment wasn't operating. I think we could still run our workshop meeting.
What we're looking at doing is creating a dedicated page on the website and listing the workshops, whether they're public excluded or open, and then noting noting the public excluded reasons if there were some. So if we had a situation like that, we would be able to add a note to say, for whatever reason, the recording didn't work on that day, but we would still have the PowerPoint presentation or officer notes or whatever other documentation was produced for that workshop.
And perhaps in that instance, we may take minutes or, more detailed notes of the meeting on that particular occasion, but you'd hope that those instances wouldn't be too frequent.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually very supportive of the substantive motion in front of us. I think the bit that we perhaps may not have considered so much, and based on the phased sort of approach of implementation as well, is that there is a crap load of work that needs to go on in order to make this function, probably to achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is that increased transparency. We're talking about listing workshops publicly, setting up new storage for information that we'll be recording, setting up new processes and guidelines for the public who I think should be entitled to come to our workshops if they want to. There's a whole lot of background stuff. The technology aspect that Councillor Brown has raised can help greatly in producing summaries and producing something that is usable. Video is fantastic, but a searchable text file is even easier to use if you know how to hit Control Find. Having the audio there, perhaps, for people to be able to listen to, again, you can kind of just drag and it's easier. You have more of a chance of the file actually performing at an optimal level than video, etc. and so on. And the issue of ownership, once the information goes out, I think we need to be careful about what we actually do and how we go about it to make sure that we are, from a liability perspective, and that we're protecting the organisation and the people that are presenting as well. So I like the substantive motion because I think it produces a compromise and it says that we're committed to improving transparency, but I think it just gives us that bit of wiggle room to get things right within that 12-month review, which is why I'm very supportive of it.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm fractionally confused by Councillor Crown whether she agrees with text and or audio visual.
No, I'm talking about audio as in a file that you can listen to, like a podcast or whatever, Spotify, and the text, because what the technology has the ability to do is it takes that audio, right, and creates the text from it automatically, reducing the amount of admin time, etc., that's required from our staff. So that, yeah.
Okay, so at the present time, B2 is text and audio
Text
visual.
or audio visual, yes.
Yeah, so again, we have a slight variation. This is text and or audio with visual removed. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying that I think the substantive motion provides the option to do any or all of those. Yeah.
So
I guess what
Is that fair?
Councillor Tully, what you're saying is that the motion we're debating at the moment doesn't specifically have audio as a standalone. It's audio visual.
Yes.
So are you suggesting, that we would amend that to be text, audio, or audio visual?
Yes, because I was going to support what is currently B2 text or audio visual purely on the basis that it gives us options, and also using some of the argument from Deputy Mayor Brosnan, this is for 12 months. So if at the end of the 12-month period we're finding we're not providing sufficient, then it could be altered rather than just having one option of audio visual and adding future options. I think we should take advantage of the best technology that we can use that is available now, and I think that the what Councillor Brown and Councillor Crown have talked about provides that, and it will give transparency, and it will provide the information that those in the public who are interested can source. So I would support a further amendment as it is now there, text, audio or audio-visual recording of those workshops.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and as the mover, I'm very happy to accept that further amendment. Councillor Brown?
Could I have a question about what that means? So that's saying that you could just get the written text and nothing else? Or you could just get the hearing, the sound and nothing else? That's how it reads?
Yes, that's right.
Audio-visual. So you could just get the minutes written out, or you could just get a recording?
Transcript.
But you
That's
can,
what it says.
you can access the text.
Text only, yeah.
If you wish.
And no, no audio.
I don't know that and or is necessary, personally. I think, yeah. Because you could easily just opt to have more than one anyway without making it and or in the actual resolution. Councillor Simpson, did you?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree with the changes and the direction of the discussion, because I think it's really important that we do, as Deputy Mayor set out, set an aspiration as to what we want to achieve. But I think we have to be really careful about not setting ourselves up to fail in the first instance. So I think it's really important that we provide staff options to go forward with. Then they can come back and inform us of what they're capable of doing over time. And I think that's what we're now providing, and I think that's really important, because I think that the last thing we need is it's a change for us, it's a change for staff, it's a change for our ratepayers, and I think it's really important that we have a plan for how to implement the change to succeed in an outcome that works for everyone, not just setting certain systems or processes up to fail, and I think that's why the changes are significant.
Okay, so we have a mover, we have a seconder, we've had some additional conversation. Again, just as my right of reply, I agree with the comments that have been made about providing options, particularly at this early stage of implementation, so that we can, over the ensuing 12 months, utilise different options and then review and just ensure that we are setting ourselves up for success. So are there any further speakers to the motion before I put that? Councillor Taraha.
Kia ora, through you, Your Worship. I'm neither for or against, and I fully support transparency, improving transparency, and just following on from Councillor Brown's and Councillor Crown's kōrero and the background mahi associated with that, implementing this, and maybe the associated costs. I'm just wondering if maybe an investigation into those costs might be beneficial, and if it's a large sum, maybe they go out for consultation, because essentially those costs go on to our ratepayers. And following on from Councillor Simpson's concerns regarding the training, also a slight concern regarding the management of the public during meetings. Some of our workshops quite heavy, and distractions from the public and all that may have a bit of an impact on some of the kōrero during the workshops. Just slight concerns on the public during workshops. And finally, does pre-agenda meetings also include a workshop as well?
So no, pre-agenda meetings would not be classified as a workshop. And just touching on your point about cost, there has been some initial investigation into that, and it's indicated it will not be significant, certainly not to the extent that we would need to go out and undertake public consultation on that. So I guess just acknowledging the concerns that you have raised. Thank you, Councillor Tariha. But I don't think there's any further action required with regards to those at the moment, and so I'm actually going to put the motion. So if all those in favour could please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
So Councillor Bogue and Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Gregg.
Can I abstain?
And an abstain from Councillor Tariha. So that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, moving on to item 12, the minutes of joint committees, which we have minutes from the Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee and the Omaranui Refuse Landfill Joint Committee. Just will invite members of those committees if they did want to share any information over and above what's in the minutes that have already been provided to councillors. Councillor Price.
I think Martin Williams' comments in 5 is quite a good outline of it. We do have a land transport meeting tomorrow, so we'll update us because there's lots of changes going on.
Thank you, Councillor Price. There certainly is with our new government. So, okay. Were there any questions from councillors of the minutes? Okay. Could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Price. Thank you, Councillor Taraha. Any further comments?
No.
So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. Next up is the amendment to the 2024 schedule of standing committees and council meetings. Anna, was there any additional comments you wanted to make to that? So this is just a procedural paper. We are needing to change some dates for some meetings, and then we're introducing new dates for some hearings that are on the horizon. It's certainly going to be a busy time this year. So could I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And our agenda item 14, Climate Action Joint Committee. We are doing a replacement of the alternate. So that is, as the paper says, Councillor Gregg is stepping into that role. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Bowe.
Just a question. If a person is an alternate, as I am in one committee, and of the three, if one of the other proper delegates isn't able to attend, does the alternate get a vote?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there's no further questions, could I have, I'm happy to move from the chair, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Action points register. And again, we will take as read, but open up for any questions that they may be with regards to that actions register. Noting there have been a number completed, which is great to see. If there's no questions or discussion, can I have a mover and seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Brosnan, thank you, and Councillor Tariha. Any comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. And lastly, on our open agenda, reports under delegated authority, we have our tenders let, just the one in this meeting's paper, which is for the playground design and construction of Anderson Park Stage 2. Any questions on this one? Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor McGrath and Councillor Crown. If there's no comments, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. So we now have our recommendation to exclude the public, noting that we do have, for item number 1, Greg Timms, HR consultant of Greg Timms and Associate, permitted to remain in for this part of the session. We were to have a guest for item 5. We no longer have that. So if I could have a mover, thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, seconded by Councillor Crown. And we, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. We will have a very short 2-minute break and then move into